Welcome to UIA Podcast, where our members and member firms address important legal issues of the day. We hope you will enjoy today's edition. Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second UIA podcast. And I am delighted today to welcome Aparna Viswanathan, who is a UIA counsellor and who next week will be running a UIA webinar on digital transformation, what lawyers must think about, smart contracts, digital services and blockchain. That's going to be running on the 2nd and 3rd of March remotely, and we'll give you all the details of how you can sign up to that webinar later on. But before we get started talking about that, I just wanted to give you a brief introduction into Aparna. Aparna received her Bachelor of Arts degree from Harvard University and her Juris Doctor from the University of Michigan Law School. She is called to the bar in England, as well as in New York, Washington, DC, California and India. She is fluent in French, Spanish and Italian and advises clients in all of these three languages. After practicing law in large law firms in the US, she founded Viswanathan & Co. Associates, a law firm based in New Delhi. She is a general corporate lawyer and she has been working in infrastructure and inbound investments into India. And also has a subspecialism which is relevant for today's podcast in technology law. She has been writing in this area for 20 years. She has 2 books published on this area of law. Her next book is going to be on this topic. And for 20 years, she sat on the technology committee of the IBA. So welcome to the podcast, Aparna.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today.
And we are recording this podcast again by Zoom. And at the moment, Aparna, I understand that you are in Spain. Is that right?
Correct.
Great.
Madrid.
So I just wonder if you could start just telling us a little bit about yourself. What attracted you to law? How did you end up becoming a lawyer?
I grew up in the United States. Of course, I'm originally from India. I grew up first in the UK and the United States. And, I think, when growing up and during the time of the Bhopal case, I was very much affected by that. And I did feel, with the skills that the legal profession gives you, that I could do something for India, for the children of the world. And, that feeling has always remained with me. And, I am hoping that one day, through the use of legal skills that, I can do something for the children of the world, frankly. It still remains with me.
Yeah, that's a laudable aim, which so many lawyers will be able to associate with, that they felt the same way being attracted to this area of work. And in terms of technology law, this has clearly become a sort of a passion, a specialism for you. You've written about it extensively. How did you become interested in that? Why? What's the attraction?
Back 20 years now, 21 years. It was the year 2000. And I remember, digital signatures were coming out and, it was all about, encryption. And I said, oh my God, if I don't read up about this, I'll be lost. It's a whole new language and the whole thing is going to change. The profession is going to change. And I really need to, read up about this. That's how I felt, when the ABA guidelines were coming out and, you had the UN guideline, it was a brand new field. And that's why I started looking at it then purely from an intellectual pursuit. And then prior to that, actually, I think the first time I ever spoke on this area was in 1989 at it was a conference in New York on Software India. So really my interest in this went back to then when I was looking at the whole area of the software development and the whole history of the software industry in India prior to Y2K. So it's really been a long time I've been looking at this industry and somewhat fascinated by it.
Yeah, amazing. And as I said, you've published 2 books in this area. You have another one coming out. What have been the focuses of those publications?
Well, see, the first book was one outsourcing to India. It was cross-border legal issues, and because sitting as an Indian lawyer, then that book came out in 2008, and I really felt, as an Indian lawyer, how could I use my skills in India to answer the questions of my American colleagues? Because I was no longer practicing in America. Back then in 2008, I was still traveling back and forth. I had my office in the UK. I was already qualified as an English barrister, but I said, how can I, sit in India and answer those questions on, across border issues that would be of use to the international councils who are really running the deals. So, if by and large it focused on those issues, and it was very contract based, and it looked at Indian law where would be relevant to the deals.
Great. And then your next book?
And the second book on cyber law, I think all my books, they've started with, and my book chapters also on India. I think it was because at Harvard I did political science. They've all been grounded in what was happening in India, in the world at that time. And I was very fascinated by really the cyber wars. I looked at it was almost like the third war. It looked at the cyber war, what happened in Georgia, what happened to Estonia. I went to the GITEC law conference in Estonia, and I was so blown away. We just came out of the airport, and there was free Wi-Fi everywhere. And I was like, oh my God, this is the future, I had an office in Bangalore. You can come out of the airport in Bangalore and there's free Wi-Fi. I'm like, Estonia, white knights and everything. And then, you heard about, the whole shadows in the cloud and what was happening with cyber warfare in India. So it was set in that context, and it looked at cybersecurity, and it was very much security focused, but as well a lot of focus on the Information Technology Act in India, and looking at the developments of course data protection. And we spent a good 10 years, I think, a lot of councils in Europe and India looking at adequate and effective protection of data. So all those legal issues, which then post the focus on signatures and the execution of contracts that came up in development of technology law over the last 2 decades.
Mm. And what are you able to tell us about the book that's coming out? Where have you gone now?
I'm still working, on the table of contents, and definitely, the first focus will be on, on contracts, because it's really fascinating, and it's also the first session. That's why I made it the topic of the first session, because it's all about contracts, and it's the heart of digital transformation. Also, that's what I want to also convey to the to the lawyers. That's what's so exciting about this webinar. That we think, okay, of course, technology is the basis of this, but contracts is sitting actually at the heart of it, because that touches the entire part of the business enterprise. And unless the contracts are connected and everybody's on the same platform, you're not going to be able to transform the entire enterprise. So the lawyers are running it. And then we have this fascinating thing, not only, transforming the contract digitally, but the contracts themselves are going to be connected. They're going to be connected to things, or to the Internet of Things. And real-time data is then going to be fed into these contracts. So then we're going to see how they're going to be enforced, and how parties are actually carrying out their contractual obligations. So it goes beyond just the point of signature of those contracts. So it's absolutely fascinating. The concept of smart contracts. It's contracts like we've never ever seen it before. And I think what I was thinking in the year 2000 is actually happening now. That they may not need us anymore. Actually, to draft contracts, we may be out of a job. So, it's like, hello, they don't need us anymore. Bye. It's the end of the webinar. No, it's not that, but it's much more fascinating.
Yeah, it does. It sounds absolutely fascinating. And we're going to go on, as I say, and sort of talk specifically about the webinar and what it's going to cover, and why it's coming out now, and why the UIA and you thought that it was important. But before we did, I just wanted to ask about your involvement with the UIA. What prompted you to join? Why did that feel like the right decision for you?
As you mentioned at the beginning, I have been, involved for a very long time with the IBA, and enjoyed that tremendously, especially, as I was, I've been in India for all these years, and then traveled to a lot of the conferences, and, got involved a lot with the technology committee. I'm also enjoying now the UIA because, I think there are many more, smaller firms also. It's not just the very large firms, if I may say so. And I think it's very European focused, and I have worked a lot with European companies. I speak 4 European languages. I travel a lot particularly now since the pandemic, between Madrid and New Delhi, and so it's it's another home for me. It's a European base, frankly. So I feel very comfortable with it.
And in the first podcast we did, Jerry Roth and Jorge Marti, the previous president and the current president of the UIA, were talking about really the network and the resources that are available, the mentorship that's available to young people, and that they're really trying to kind of make the UIA much more attractive to younger lawyers. And I wondered if you felt that was something you'd experienced, having the access to lawyers all across the world, that network, and how that can really assist an international practice.
Now I'm at the stage of the game where I'm trying to connect to all other lawyers and be as inclusive as possible. Whether they're Indian or they're not Indian. I feel that's very, very important. And I think I have to need to be a mentor and be as inclusive as possible, whether they're women or they're not women. And that I feel that's something that informs everything I do. And yes, it's like, as lawyers, we do have to reinvent ourselves now, because post-pandemic and everything is absolutely changing. And it's what I thought in the year 2000s, what I think now, and the entire thing has changed. The profession has changed, and even the profession of corporate law has changed. And we need to be aware of that. I mean, whether we're 25 years down in the profession or starting out, and it's a very important message even for the younger people, because I mean the whole practice of corporate law, after all, it's a construct. I mean, I came out of law school. You have to go work on Wall Street, but it's actually a construct. We are not just. I mean, I also go to court, and I also defend clients in arbitrations. I didn't grow up with a divided bar. I mean, I'm an American lawyer, but even American lawyers don't do both. But I always did both. I did litigation and corporate work. But the corporate work was really a construct created by basically the Anglo-American lawyers. And that whole construct is changing because of technology. So I think we need to understand it as more senior people in the profession, and definitely share the message with the younger people who it's going to really affect.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, look, so let's go on and talk about the webinar itself. Now, as listeners will know, I am a family lawyer, so I am right now completely outside of my comfort zone. So what I'd love you to do is, just for those listening for whom digital transformation, smart contracts, digital service and blockchain, why would they come to this webinar? Why is it important? What is it all about?
I think the webinar is really important for lawyers who are in any area of practice, because contracts, inform, as I was trying to say earlier, it's so critical to digital transformation, because digital transformation affects everything that a company does. It affects the value proposition of a company. So it affects the value proposition of a company. It affects the value proposition of what everybody does, because everybody needs contracts. Everything is it's the written word, depending, no matter if you're a family lawyer or any type of lawyer that you are. So it's the basic building blocks of agreements, and that itself is being transformed by the technology that we're hearing about every day. And I know there's a lot of hype right now about blockchain, and that my colleague Adrian Knight, who's moderating the third session, is going to be a very fascinating session. There are lawyers, very seasoned lawyers from from major banks, with a lot of experience, who are going to answer fascinating questions about this area. But this whole technology about blockchain also, it's also very relevant to contracts. It may not, the whole issue of Bitcoin is going to be the next currency. It's slightly different, but it's very relevant to contracts, and how contracts are being completely transformed from the way we know them today. And it's not just about okay, we're going to put them in the cloud, and how we're going to manage the different versions of them, and we're going to store the data differently. It's not that. It's not even. They're not even being going to be created by humans anymore. Really, it's different. It's code, and the way when it's going to be determined whether the parties have actually executed them. For sure we're not going to have litigation over breach of contract, which is a good thing also. But it's definitely going to happen. It's definitely going to change. Not only, okay, we have digital signatures. What I was worried about then was nothing compared to what's going to happen now. So, it's our basic instruments, and every lawyer needs to know about it. I mean, that's why we have this as the title of the webinar. And I'm trying to focus on a way so that we can all understand it. I certainly don't, from the technological part of it too, obviously, I'm also trying to understand this is something, brand new. So it's the idea so that we can, make the audience lawyers, and we have a technical person who's the head of blockchain at MinSafe, which is Spain's leading digital transformation company, who's on the panel. So he's going to be the technical person that we will look to tell us as the lawyers in the audience, look, how does this actually work?
Yeah. Well, it does. It seems to kind of, I guess that's why it's happening over 2 days. You've got 3 sessions because you're looking to kind of really map out, looking at the recent technological advances in artificial intelligence, in Internet of Things, IoT, big data, blockchain, which you've mentioned, data analytics, and how those have enabled global tech majors to harness the data obtained in data processing to deliver actionable business insights. And so you're really looking to look at the entire process of digital transformation and how that can change the value proposition of what you can offer global clients. So it's really taking a huge world and trying to kind of bring that to life for the lawyers working in this area, as far as I can tell.
I'm not going to go that much in depth about the entire technology because that's obviously too much. We're going to focus particularly on smart contracts, on the digital contract transformation process, on the DCX process, and that's why we're looking more about the contract part of digital transformation, how that's central to digital transformation, what do we mean about digital contract transformation, and what do we mean about smart contracts. So that's in session 1. That's the part of digital transformation we're talking about. But otherwise, it's obviously too vast a topic to get into, in the 90 minutes that we have, and it's not, frankly, for the lawyers' audience, it's not that useful. That's not really what we're looking at. But it's more tools that lawyers can take away with that.
Amazing. So that's the first session, looking at that, and then you've got second session looking more at digital services, the digital platform economy stuff. Is that right? What's that one all about?
It's also a very, very timely topic because the whole Digital Services Act, the package as it's referred to, Digital Markets Act, that came out in December, 31st December of 2020, and that is really looking at how are we going to regulate. Because that's the new impetus of the whole intermediaries, and it's a very, very timely topic. And the EU is looking at how are we going to regulate the intermediaries, the gatekeepers of these platforms. And this is a much more, session 2 is much more a strictly legal issue, looking at first of all the ownership of data. You can refer to it as an intellectual property rights issue or a data ownership issue, because there's a lot of new data that's going to be generated by all these new technologies, okay? And earlier, it may not have been so important because it was what I call the back office processing. It was what we did in the outsourcing era. Okay, that was like kind of cost cutting and it was back office stuff. And now it's front office processing because it's about digital transformation. It's about changing the value proposition of the company itself. So these new digital products are very important. It's the raison d'etre, it's the value proposition of the company itself. So ownership of that stuff is really important. So who's going to decide that? These are very, very important issues, and it puts IPR now, center stage. So it's that issue, and also the issue of these platforms that we have. What about competition issues? Who's owning all these digital platforms? So that's another major issue. And then the whole role of the intermediaries, because we saw that in the American elections. How are they going to be regulated? The gatekeepers and the takedown issues. So the EU has come up with new EU-wide rules. So the speakers are going to look at that, and we've got an Indian speaker, because of course Indian law has been quite developed in this issue, and then we have a comparative view with one Indian speaker, and then we're going to have specialists from Uriam and Indus who are looking at the competition angle, who are looking also at the data ownership angle, and another specialist from an Italian law firm who's also focusing on this area. So this is strictly more a cutting edge legal issue in session 2.
I mean, it does sound really, really cutting edge. I mean, fascinating for anyone who's interested. And then you've got a third session on the 3rd of March. And that one, as I understand it, is looking more specifically at blockchain. Is that right? Sort of a more focused session on that.
Yes and no. I mean, it's AI and blockchain, yes, but how it's really being applied and how it's being used to transform. I mean, the insurance sector and the financial services sector, so fintech and insurtech. And, it's not just focusing on blockchain, but also other technologies and using, we're lucky to have speakers who are using it in their daily professional lives. I mean, they're working as lawyers, in banks. And we were looking at the area and looking at the whole issue of how banks are using this sort of technology to completely revolutionize the flow of money and settlement of transactions and their everyday financial transactions, and how these technologies could be used to resolve a financial crisis. Like, could they have been used in 2008 to resolve the crisis differently, and the crisis that countries find them in today, could they be used to help us? So these are absolutely fascinating topics that session 3 will be looking at.
Yeah, they sound fascinating. And this is the session where you have Adrian Knight, who you mentioned earlier, who's coming to moderate the session.
Right. That's right. And we have Ashu Thakur who's moderating session 2.
Amazing. Well, I think, it sounds absolutely brilliant. And for anyone who is interested, you can register online. You can go onto the website. It's www.uianet, that's all one word, .org. If you're a UIA member, it's just €60. If you're not a member, then for all 3 sessions, it's €100. So still an absolute bargain for what you're going to get and the insight that you're going to get. The working language for this particular webinar will be English. If you do have any questions, then you can email uiacentre@uianet.org and ask any questions that you might have. Aparna, before we finish this podcast, I just wondered if there was anything else you wanted to add, anything else you want to say about why you are really excited about this webinar coming up next week?
That I'm very excited about this webinar because, as I mentioned, it's a completely brand new area of the law. It's really, uncharted area. It's cutting edge legal issues. It's an area where, I'm trying to, to come up with a table of contents for a book. We're really looking at, I can't even focus on a particular jurisdiction because the law is not there in different countries. It's almost concept by concept and looking at the countries where they may have, developed some legal concepts on the particular topic. So I think, especially for young lawyers, it's a great area to focus on, and I welcome everyone to join us.
Yeah, and I suppose it's really one of those areas where an organisation with an international catchment area, if I can put it that way, really can take a lead because, the digital world does not abide by land borders in the way that other things do. It sort of crosses over, and then you have to look at where those different jurisdictions meet and where conflicts lie between different jurisdictional areas within the digital world.
Yeah, that's correct. And here we have a very international, our organizing committee is Indian. So we are, bringing to bear, because a lot of our, the companies which are really taking the lead in digital transformation, of course, are the big 5 Indian, outsourcing companies who've been doing this for a good 20 years. So we have a lot of Indian flavor here. Plus we have the European expertise, because of all the startups that are happening, whether they're in Spain or Germany or elsewhere. So yes, it's very international oriented. And not limited to focusing only on Silicon Valley or Barcelona or Bangalore. Everyone is now getting involved.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's going to be absolutely fantastic. I hope that everyone who signs up enjoys it immensely. I wish you all the best of luck, all the speakers, the best of luck. I'm sure you're going to have a brilliant time and make the very most of it, albeit it's all going to be remote.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aparna, for coming on the podcast. It's been amazing. Thank you to all the listeners
Thanks
for listening in. And we'll see you next week on the third pod.